This happened to me just last night, so I wanted to recount it while the details were still fresh in my head. Yesterday evening, I went to the cinema with a friend after work and was making my way home around 12 a.m. or so. In my neighborhood, there's a large park that separates the two sides of the estate, and it's a good shortcut for getting to the street where my house is. Now, before I go on, I should mention that I live in an extremely safe suburban town in the east of Ireland. I could probably tell you all the major crimes that have happened there in the past 20 years off the top of my head. It's known as being a place that is totally calm and very out of harm's way. I've walked through this park countless times after dark, sometimes as late as 3 a.m. during nights out with my friends, and I've never once came across anything weird or creepy. It all changed that night. The park is very big and it's mostly a wide open space. You can basically picture it as the perfect place for kids to play a game of football because there's not a lot of trees or bushes in the way. There's also no street lamps or light sources. I was walking up the trail that runs along the border of the park, and as I got about halfway along, a big shape right in the middle of the open space got my attention. It was motionless, so at first I thought it was some sort of goalpost or marker that kids had left behind while playing. But then, as I got closer, it began to move towards me, and I saw it was a person. The entire park was deserted, except for us two, and I thought it was odd he'd been standing still in the middle of it. Most people just used the two trails on either side. It was difficult to see in the dark, but it looked like a tall man with a long coat and shaggy hair. I looked around for a dog just to see if he was out late walking his dog, but saw nothing. He was just slowly striding in my direction. I looked away from him and picked up my pace, telling myself not to be ridiculous. He was probably just crossing the park and was only coincidentally walking towards me. I glanced back at him and saw that when I'd sped up, he changed direction to follow me. Still, at the same time, slow pace. I looked away again and walked quicker, but glanced back a few seconds later to make sure he wasn't still following me. He was. But then he stopped, turned away from me, and started motioning with his hands. Think about a traffic warden gesturing for a car to move forward. It looked like he was beckoning something to come towards him. I broke into a light jog for the rest of the park, looking back a few times to make sure he hadn't suddenly started to run after me. But no, he was still making that same signal right where I'd left him. I kept up a quick pace all the way back to my road, hurried up the driveway to my house, and shuddered when I closed the front door behind me. Even when I walked down there, through the park this morning on my way to work, I felt uncomfortable when I passed where he'd been. This experience certainly has left a bad taste in my mouth. It was this past Halloween, and I went out to this mall with some friends after school. We were a group of 8 senior guys, but we decided to go trick-or-treating for the last time before it became questionable. Hell, it's even more questionable now seeing 6-foot guys walking around in pirate costumes. But hey, we might as well have some fun, right? We went into the mall to find it empty for a bit. And sooner, the mall got more and more full of moms and their kids trick-or-treating at the different stores. Before we left, we all got a quick bite to eat from the food court before we went trick-or-treating. Our plan of going about Halloween was not traditional though. In a nutshell, we would be in my friend's car, and we would be driving up and down neighborhoods with the Take One bowls and dumping them in pillowcases or trash bags. Before we left, we were on our way to the exit when I had the massive urge to go to the toilet. After all, I ate some tacos from Taco Bell, and I don't know how I didn't expect this coming. I told them to go ahead and that I would catch up to them. I was starting to sweat from the urge to go, and I went pretty deep into the mall to find a restroom, finding the sign saying restrooms in a long wide hallway. Now, without thinking, I ran into the first restroom I saw and went straight into the stalls. I remember feeling relief as I sat down, ready to do my business. Right before I was about to go, however, I heard this old raspy voice. "Son, I think you're in the wrong restroom." I froze, and I let out somewhat choked, "What?" The old and raspy voice showed who he was as he bent down to tell me, "You're in the girls' restroom, son." He let out some sort of twisted giggle or crackle. I can remember his face clearly. Old and wrinkled, white tannish skin, white hair with round-framed glasses that made his psychopathic eyes huge. I was frozen. No, in complete shock and horror as I sat there looking at this man who was in the girls' restroom for God knows why. We both stared into each other for God knows how long. The old man broke the awkward silence by saying, "You know what? I'm gonna pay you a visit." He had this long, ear-to-ear grin with only his lips and was beginning to cackle more, showing his brown and rotten teeth. At that moment, I knew it was time to get the hell out of there. All I can remember before I took off was seeing him starting to crawl under the stall to me. I sat up, not even zipping my pants or putting on my belt, just pulling them up and ran. I dashed out of there as fast as I could, looking like I had just crapped my pants. As I was running out of the hallway, I looked back and saw the old man sprint. He was about 6'3" and was wearing an olive khaki jacket with black stained pants and construction boots. I kept booking it all the way until I was out of that mall. I see my friends in their car waiting on me. I ran up to my friend Fox's car, and I was shaking as I was putting on my seatbelt. He asked me what was wrong. I told him in a stern voice, "Start the car." My friend Skylar was next to me, asking why, but I cut him off and raised my voice higher. "Fox, we gotta go now." Fox started the car and signaled the rest of our group of friends to follow us. We drove out of there. I didn't even bother to look back. I have had some strange encounters with some people, some weirder than others, but I never thought that one of these days I would find myself in that position of being face to face with a deranged person in a restroom. I haven't seen him since, not that I would want to. I just pray that he left the mall as soon as I did. What still keeps me up at night, however, is why. Why was he in the girls' restroom in the first place? This really creeped my husband and I out. It was almost midnight, and we went for a late-night snack run at Walmart. We parked in the front parking lot and got out to go to the store. We had brought our baby along with us, and my husband was holding her. We were parked a little further back in that front parking lot, so we kind of had to walk nearby the back parking lot where the truck dock. As we walk past, we hear a terrified man's voice screaming help over and over. It was really dark back there, so we didn't want to walk too much closer. We just peeked a little to see what was going on. We also had our baby's safety to think about too. After seeing nothing, we went back into the store. I walked up and talked to the manager to let her know what I heard. She got scared and told me last year her and her girlfriend heard the exact same screaming too. I later called the police. This was my guilty conscience kicking in. We came to the conclusion that it might have been a setup. Someone yells help, and then a kind citizen walks over to that dark parking lot to help, to only be robbed, or worse, taken. I told my mom, and she agreed. Very creepy. I hope I never actually meet you, creepy guy in the Walmart parking lot. Hey, the Crooked Man here. Thank you so much for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed it. Interestingly enough, my mother and I went through a similar situation to that of the last story, and we too chose not to approach the men. Lucky for us, because as soon as we called the police, they stood up and left. Anyway, I will see you in the next video, and remember, deep down, we're all crooked.